Hi everyone, Pitch Canker here, and today I want to go over how I use my negative emotions and kind of like personal traumas to create and illustrate dark art, horror, anything in that kind of realm of like really evil looking emotional art. If you know me at all and you've seen my work before, I have a huge catalog of like very emotional, very intense artwork, and this is all because I kind of use this method, and I use art as my kind of, I don't want to just say like therapy, but I want to say as a cathartic practice to get this kind of stuff out of my system and to utilize it in a kind of more healthy, positive way. And I just want to go over how I think these negative emotions can be powerful tools when drawing horror or anything else, really. And like, how the extreme nature of these emotions can transport you to a creative place outside of your comfort zone, and in the process also be very cathartic for your, just like personal things you have going on. So let's go over it. Now, negative emotions like fear, rage, sadness, shame, and guilt are just a few of the feelings that can evoke a visceral response, right? An embarrassing memory will burn itself into your mind. Betrayal can permanently fill someone with rage and just like disillusion them from everything. I think when drawing, these feelings can act as like deeply personal pieces of inspiration, especially when drawing something dark or disturbing, right? I mean, it applies as well to kind of more positive art, like, feelings like love and like kindness or whatever. But we're focusing on the darker aspects today. So these are kind of the emotions that I want to go over. And I want to go over these emotions because not many people choose to express these kind of negative emotions through art, because there is a stigma around expressing yourself in this way, right? Generally, art about emotion can be seen as edgy or childish, but I think this assumption has curbed a lot of really talented artists from pursuing genuine and honest ideas about their feelings, especially the darker ones. I think the most important thing when drawing horror artwork or artwork in general is that you are honest with your feelings. You have to genuinely stare into that place, even if it's a dark place, and express what you have to say without flinching. You have to be confident with it. You might come to me and say, but Pitch, I don't want to be cringe. Like, people are calling me cringe online. I don't care. I don't care. Those people don't matter. You know how often I'm called cringe? I have 1 million followers. I have people who love my artwork, who have gotten my work tattooed on their, tattooed on their body, like stuff I can't even believe has happened in my lifetime, and I still have randoms on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere calling me cringe, calling me whatever. Like, it doesn't go away. Those people are always going to be there, and they're always going to try and put other people down because, for whatever reason, maybe they have nothing going on, maybe they're just, bitter, who knows. You cannot let those people interfere with your artistic practice. They don't matter. You have to make something that you care about, and that's all that really matters ultimately. And if you feel like it's cringe, fine, make it better next time, right? You have to improve yourself, and you have to be your own metric for how good your work is. So how do you apply these emotions, right? How do you find them and how do you use them? So I want to use this piece in the background as an example, right? My prompt for myself in this piece was to draw rage. Specifically, I wanted to draw like a smoldering hatred, right? So when I started drawing this piece out, I didn't just think of, what it meant to be angry, right? I didn't think of like, oh, what's an angry emotion? I thought about one of the moments in my life where I felt angriest. I studied how I felt in that moment, and I started drawing the shapes I felt. This led to a complex series of thoughts and feelings where I really broke down each part of what I was feeling and what that would look like, right? It became more than rage that I was trying to communicate. It became emptiness and the absence of other positive emotions. I began to notice more nuanced things like hopelessness and like this kind of just resentment as I fleshed out the face and body. The actual emotion I was trying to find revealed itself to me the more I leaned into it, right? So as I drew the creature, I kept all of these things in mind. I thought of a person at the end of the world screaming with such malice that their jaw just started to unhinge from their mouth. Its eyes would be beady, almost like holes that showed the dark and hollow center of their skull, the emptiness. The entire body would be enveloped in black, kind of representing that hopelessness I mentioned. They were drenched in it almost. Finally, I sat the piece against a pure red background, which made it feel like there was this sense of anxiety and overstimulation. And then suddenly I had an image of my mind of this terrible rage, and it was only a piece of how I felt, but it was an honest and horrific observation of my feelings, of myself. In this way, I think that every emotion can be visualized and given personality, where rage may tear and stretch and violently burn itself in others. Sadness will sink and fester, and it drains life from the page and depresses the viewer, right? Anxiety is a chittering mess chaotically overwhelming the space it occupies. Guilt crawls up next to you and crushes you slowly, a shameful albatross that weighs down upon the subject. These are all negative emotions that lend themselves perfectly to dark or disturbing concepts. Giving emotions personality, to me, is the key to being able to draw them. I often think of negative emotions as demons that possess whatever you're drawing, tearing the subject apart from the inside in an effort to escape, to an effort to show themselves even, right? To make themselves known, right? Seeing the negative emotions as aspects of ourselves and then taking the time to break down the worst parts naturally lend themselves to horrific and frightening results and deeply personal results. Although some people find it disturbing, I think ultimately drawing negative emotions like this can be cathartic and therapeutic because you are really breaking down the things that are troubling you and what they look like and how it's affected you and how you feel about them. It's a heavy experience, so it's not always for everybody, but this is how I approach it. And it's been very helpful to me. Alright, before we continue, I just want to quickly plug my custom commissions. If you're into the art in the background of this video and you want to commission a piece, then go down to the bottom of this video in the description and fill out my commission form. Then I'll hit you back up and we can work something out. I've had a lot of brand experience and I've worked with multiple companies, and just to name some of the big ones, we have Universal Music Group, Warner Records, AMC, Zero Skateboards, New Blood Interactive, and there's a whole lot more. I work on projects of all different shapes and sizes, so don't be afraid to hit me up. We can work something out, I'm sure. So, without further ado, thank you for listening, and let's get back to the video. Another element I would like to go over that I've mentioned briefly was the personal element, right? A lot of people are, they don't want to put personal elements of themselves into their work. They want to keep it separate. They want to do something that expresses maybe a different part of their life or something they admire. I think it's really important, especially with frightening art, to make it personal, to make it so that it is like in your face and it is uncomfortable, right? I think of I don't know, trying to think of like an uncomfortable or weird experience, like going over to someone's house you've never been to before, right? You're in an environment that makes you feel a little uneasy because you don't really know where things are. You're not familiar with their territory. And now, let's just take it a step further, right? Let's say you're in someone's personal space, like their bedroom or something like that, and you've never been. You're not supposed to be there. Where you have this uncanny, weird feeling, I need to get out. I need to leave. That, I think, is something that is worth evoking in the viewer when you're creating this type of artwork, right? You want to make them feel like, whose emotion is this, right? And I think the key is if you can express this well enough, eventually you make the viewer understand that this is their space as well. They also occupy this space, which is really frightening, I think, and it gives a horrific effect when you're not truly I know people say, oh, I'm drawing horror, I'm gonna draw a bunch of blood, I'm gonna draw a scary guy with knives for hands. Those are elements of it, but I do think there is this deeply personal connection that you can only make through these kind of emotional channels that you discover and take the time to build. And so for me, that's a really important part of this process. Make it personal. Put things in your art that relate to yourself, right? I've drawn so many characters over the course of my life. When I was younger, I had a crazy scene kid mullet, and I made all my characters have this kind of mullet, right? And that made it very personal for me, right? There are other less obvious, more nuanced things like that. I have a really big mouth, and I have a lot of crazy, my teeth aren't perfect, you know what I mean? They have spaces. So I make all my characters have crazy kind of screwed up teeth and big mouths, it's just, and their mouths are always open, right? That's something that I put into my art to make it way more personal. In the same way that you can, take these features and make them more personal, you can take these emotions, and once you learn to harness them, you can apply them the same way you would, take a big mouth, or you take eyes, or you take whatever and make it your own. You can make these emotions your own. I've made this particular genre of rage my own. I've made my, particular genre of sadness that I draw often my own. I think the big thing is just figuring out your emotions, visualizing what they look like, and then taking the time to create a practice around that, right? I didn't start off making these kind of really aggressive pieces. I slowly built up what they looked like over time. I got how each feature would look when applied to different characters or subjects or whatever. I think the big thing is just taking a look at your emotions and figuring out what they look like. You can even make a list. You can say write down a list of the 3 things that affect you the most. It could be anxiety, depression, or anger, right? Rage. and write down what those things look like to you. Just make a little list, do a few bullet points. Be like, rage looks like, someone's head on fire. Some rage looks like, someone's eyes popping out of their head angry. Some rage looks like a closed mouth with a bunch of teeth, like rows and rows of teeth. It could be anything. Write those down and then try to execute them little by little. Maybe it's not the perfect iteration the first time. Make another list. Keep visualizing it. Close your eyes. Really sit there and think, like, what does this look like? And not only what does it look like, how does it feel? Like, what does it feel? Do I feel it in my bones? Do I feel it in my fingertips? All those things matter. Like, maybe if you feel, it in your fingertips when you get angry, your fingers become long and like, disjointed and like horrific, right? These are all things to take into account. So just like really observe what your emotions are. I think it's an important thing. And we focus so much in art on how you would basically approach something like a still life or something realistic, but I don't think we take enough time to really sit down and observe the emotional aspect of it, which I think leads to a lot of really cool stylistic choices over the course of time. So to wrap things up and circle back to the beginning, how do I use my negative emotions to create like disturbing and horrific art? And my answer to that is just by being honest with those emotions, by really taking the time to sit down with them, observe them, write down what they mean, and then recreate them and try and figure out what that looks like. I think a big part of it is just sitting down with these feelings and saying, okay, what do I have to do here? What do you look like? And once you figure that out, then you can go in and be like, oh, that's how this looks. Let's try and illustrate it. Let's use good compositions. Let's use good skills. But, I think the big thing is just letting those feelings take over, right? Not letting feelings like cringe or like shame or whatever get in the way of you posting and creating this kind of artwork, right? I think there's a big stigma around it. I think if you can get past that stigma and really start observing it like a piece of data, and something that has, an actual impact on what you're creating, then you can like kind of get past this cringe feeling and you can create something really incredible that's super unique to you and will honestly probably flesh out your own personal style way more. And again, this is for horror artwork and disturbing artwork especially, but you can take this and apply it to any emotion. You're trying to communicate a feeling to the audience with any piece of artwork you do. With any piece of artwork, you're trying to create something that evokes a feeling in the viewer. So if you're not being honest with yourself and you're not looking at your feelings critically, then you're not going to be making successful artwork, especially in the horror space. Like, especially if you want to be disturbing or whatnot, you need to look at these emotions that disturb you potentially. That's how I view it, and that's how I approach my work. So that was a short video on how I use emotion to draw horror. There's obviously a lot more to this subject, so let me know in the comments what kind of emotions you like to draw, or if you'd like to see me expand more upon this idea. I haven't posted in a minute, so I wanted to kind of do this shorter video in between. But, I have a huge video I've been working on that's going to be dropping soon. It's about 30 years of horror video games that have come out from 1994 to 2024, so I'm really excited about that. But I hope you enjoyed this shorter video in the meantime as I finish editing it. So, as always, thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best and make this happen. And always, never give up, never lose courage, and never stop creating. Thank you, everyone, for watching, and have a good rest of your night. Bye-bye.